All right, we're going to go ahead and get things started here. I think almost everybody who RSVP has arrived, so we still might have a few other people coming in. But to be respectful of everyone's time that was here at 6:30, it's already a little bit after, so we'll keep going. This is an open dialogue, an open forum. There's no agenda, there's no presentation. We've got several of us here from the city. Dat over there, you remember, he's our finance director. We have Harjot, who is in the city manager's office. And we have Eden, of course, who was our presenter, our economic development director, and myself. And for those of you who didn't hear, we have a double agent amongst us. Scott, down here at the end, is a Morgan Hill resident of 3 years, am I correct?
Yes.
Normally works for the city of Mountain View in their police department, but he's kind of on a special assignment here with the city of Morgan Hill. The county has a program where periodically we will do an exchange with other agencies, and so that's what Scott is doing right now. But he had already been watching our wonderful Saturday morning videos, so he'd been paying attention to the whole Engage Morgan Hill as a resident, and probably just a little bit curious about this agency that he was going to be spending some time with. So we're excited to have him here.
Thank you.
Before we launch into just whatever you want to talk about, there is one thing that I did want to share with the group. The last two meetings, it was brought up by different ones of you that, probably a revenue measure is something that we need to be looking at in this whole equation. And I think the first time it was brought up, I said, well, that's probably true, but we want to make sure we're not jumping to a solution and that, everybody has a really good foundation on what this looks like. Obviously, the city internally, we have certainly thought about a revenue measure too. I mean, that's not a secret. Last time, and I don't know if it was you, Brian, who brought it up, someone said, yeah, it was you, that the school district is looking at having something on the ballot. There are lots of possibilities. The county, I'm not sure if the county though, I thought I just saw say that the county's not going to move ahead.
Yeah, not moving forward at this time.
But that perhaps March rather than November would be the time if there's going to be a revenue measure to move forward with it. Anyway, as we're listening to what you're saying, sharing information, also having internal conversations, we've been looking at all those things as staff as well. And so something that has been decided internally, but it's not without paying attention to what this group is saying to us too, is that we're going to move ahead with some polling. And just so you know, I can't imagine that there's any municipality out there or that would move ahead with any type of a revenue measure, putting something on a ballot without doing some polling ahead of time. It's a way to kind of get a sense of how much support, or is there not any support for something, and they try and feel it out in different ways. So, because of the fact that if there were going to be a revenue measure in March, we need to do polling very quickly here because of the time frames that need to be met. Yeah. So anyway, I wanted you to be aware of that, and I hope that sounds okay to this group, because it's actually because you also have been talking about this, and we get back from our Saturday meetings and we talk internally, and of course we wouldn't be doing our due diligence as staff if we weren't following along and paying attention to all the things that are going on. So that is something that will be happening. We haven't signed a contract yet with the polling firm, I don't believe, but we've had a couple of conversations, and we'll be moving forward with something like that very quickly. Because there's also another poll going on out there, and some of you may have already received it, I don't know. I know at least one employee of the city did. There is another poll that is not a city poll going on, so not to be confused if you happen to be contacted for polling. It is about our community. They should be clarifying that it's not a city-sponsored poll, but that is happening, and then right on the heels of that would be a second poll that would be being done by the city. Does that make sense?
Yeah, who's doing the other one?
It's in relation to the, I think the developer for the two hotels that were referended. I think they're trying to get a sense of, where, and Edith, if you want to jump in on that, if you know any more. It's not our deal, so we're not really in the middle of it, but I think they're trying to get a sense of where the community is at in relation to support or not support for those hotels. Because essentially what will happen is that the city council has already decided that in March, we will have those two hotels that were referended. Hi, Kim, come on in. On the ballot. And so basically it will be up to our community to decide, do we want those two hotels or do we not? And so I think that's what they're trying to get a sense of on the developer side, because I'm sure they're looking at, do they need to do any campaigning or anything around the issue? And the poll will probably help to inform them. The poll that the city would like to do, though, that will also help inform this group as we continue our discussions and look at the equation and look at the different things that are part of ensuring that we are fiscally sustainable going into the future. And I think hopefully the message has been coming across that it's not one thing. Even one tax measure doesn't solve our issues going forward. Awesome economic development and bringing in all the businesses and the right businesses doesn't solve the whole thing going forward. It's a combination of all, and it's an equation that we need to figure out how to put together and probably tweak now and then over time, right? I think as business would do, you're watching the market, you're paying attention to the economy, you're looking at what's happening. Unfortunately, local government is not able to respond sometimes as quickly as businesses are out in the private sector. So that's all I have to say. And if there's any questions about that, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, let's just wherever anybody would like to go with the conversation. Ryan?
Maureen, what's the last date that we have available to put it on the ballot for March? Is it November or something?
I actually believe it's the very beginning of December. I don't.
So
do you have a calendar?
we have to have everything to the county by December 6th. So backtracking that to 30 days minimum. So you're right, November would be ideal. If not,
And that would be, and just so we're clear, the city council has to decide. It's a city council decision to decide if they're going to put something on the ballot and when. So it would need to come to the council as an item. Actually, I think we were talking about maybe mid-November.
yeah, depending on
Because we also have to look at where council meetings fall and whether or not
Exactly.
we have to call a special meeting. And
right. So that's kind of what led to this. After having our Saturday conversations, we went back to the drawing board and said, okay, should we proceed with March? Then we looked at the county dates and backtracked from that is when we got to have everything in place. So October 23rd would be a potential, depending on the items or the type of revenue measures that we might consider putting forward, but definitely no later than the November 6th, right?
no, there's not much time at all. That's why
Yeah, so-
we needed to make a decision to move forward with polling quickly.
Are we supposed to at some point in time be reporting out to the city council about how we're progressing?
Yes, yes.
So we should be doing that
So,
yesterday.
Well, I would like to say something. I think it's responsible for the city to seek taxes. But I think it's irresponsible for us to just decide right away taxes.
I agree. I mean, that's why we're doing all of this
Yeah.
information.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I also think
So when there's
that
questions
if-
about, well, when should we?
But just to report to the city council, not telling them that we are advising any particular action, but to how this conversation has been going and some of our thoughts and everything, so that they are more up to speed when we do come forward with an advisory recommendation, because that's all we can do. We can't
right.
do anything else but that. And then but they'll have some history and some information prior to us coming to them with a package that.
I would just like to be able to say that when we talk to the city council, it's more than yay, nay
Right.
taxes.
Well, because they have to make the decision, but we can.
Well, yeah, I know they have to make the decision, but, you know, we're considering Morgan Hill. We're considering what the community wants. And I think that our advantage is that we're out in the community, we're not part of the city. We come across a lot of people who have a lot of different visions on what they want. And our recommendation should incorporate the best thinking about what everyone else is saying.
Yeah, I don't disagree with any of that. I think
Okay.
you're saying the same thing.
It's just I get nervous when we talk about the taxes.
So-
Because to me, there's so much stuff that we could be talking about.
Maybe I should just offer one point of clarification that because of the timeframes that lead into putting something on the ballot, this conversation is speeding up, let's say, very prematurely, it actually in my mind, because we're having to talk about polling right now, because we have to, if there's any chance, and I mean, again, it ultimately ends up being council's decision. And when this group comes to talk to the council, yeah, it shouldn't, I would hope, it's not gonna be just, yes, absolutely, we need taxes and that's the solution to this. I would hope that it's, you know, a broader perspective, although don't let what I hope be what dictates. That was Maureen, who am I? I guess I'm a city staff person tonight, so I have to put my resident piece away. But we do have to make a decision to move forward with polling, and so that is a decision that's been made by the city. But I guess my point is, it's not made without consideration of input that's already coming from this group, that a revenue measure is something that should be at least considered. And so just because you poll does not mean that you move forward. As a matter of fact,
The results could be exactly the opposite.
yeah,
Exactly.
if the results are very unfavorable, and this happened back in 2015 or 2016, because we were looking at the possibility of a revenue measure then, and we did 2 polls actually, and we did one poll at the beginning of a process then that was different, very different from this, but it was another process where we tried to reach out to the community. And we did another poll at the end of that, and the polling was worse at the end of our supposed outreach than it was.
It went from marginal to worse.
Yeah, so it's one of those things that gives you more data and more information so that it's expensive to put a measure on the ballot, and you want to make sure if you do it that there's a good chance that it will be well received and that it'll be successful. If you know from the get-go it's probably not going to be successful, it's usually not worth it to do it.
Just a point of information. We bought our house here in November of '98. The moving truck unloaded my stuff the last week in December. And by the second week in January, I was invited to a meeting at the city, which was to gather information from the people, the taxpayers, etc. And from that day until today, I think the city has been very, very receptive of wanting to know what all of its taxpayers think before they don't just leap into things. They want this information, that information, that information. And I've been part of city things, and I've been not part of city things, and it hasn't changed.
Right.
I think there's a couple issues that we need to consider. One is that the general population doesn't know what the situation with the city is. They don't know what the finances are. They don't know that we're eating into our reserves. They don't know that we're not able to pave the roads like we should be because we don't have the money. And they consider, the police and fire and other things of importance, which the city does also. But the poll, I think, has to be worded properly, or we have to get that word out as much as we can to the population so that they understand. This isn't to enhance things in Morgan Hill. This is just to take care of some of the shortfallings that we have right now that are going to continue to get worse over the next few years. And that's going to be an issue for us as a city. You know, what happens if a recession comes? It's even worse. Let's not even talk about a recession. But I think that's the message. We have to somehow get that message out in the poll somehow that, hey, we're not just asking for money to build another school, or not school, but build another
We're
park.
definitely not asking for money to build another school.
To build another park or to do anything else. We're really looking for money to sustain Morgan Hill to the level that people have been used to and that we've been failing at for the last few years. So how do we get that message out? How does the poll, get that message across in a really meaningful way that people understand that this is really why we're going after the money?
If I can just help out, I was invited here with the intention of not speaking because this was supposed to be your meeting. Maureen's update has kind of started the meeting on this conversation, but just for the sake of trying to be helpful, maybe one of the questions is, what is it that you want to get out of this meeting? Because maybe the conversation is not just about the conversation got started on this place about polling just because you provided that update. But you asked for this meeting because you wanted to talk amongst yourselves. So maybe one of the things that you need to think about is, what do you want to get out of today? I'm going to try to be helpful and kind of pick up key themes that I hear. And promise to try to behave, not to contribute, because this is supposed to be about you to talk to each other.
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Brian was saying. Like, you can ask the same question in two totally different ways and get
Yes.
completely different answers. So I think the context is key, and as representatives of the community, it would be great to have a chance to look at the polling or like how it's constructed.
Yeah,
So we
actually,
can give that context.
if any of you are interested, there's obviously an internal team of people who's working with the polling firm, who are experts at doing this, and we do get the opportunity to carefully look at the questions, and there's a lot of things that are considered in the way a polling question is put together. If there's anyone who's on this team that would like to be a part of that, we're more than open. And when we have those available, we'd be happy to have you join us. Unfortunately, it'll be a daytime meeting, in the midst of our regular workday, which unfortunately is the midst of your regular workday. But if anyone is available, as soon as we know when that is going to happen, which will be coming up pretty soon, and there might actually be a couple of them. Usually it takes a couple of rounds. I mean, it's kind of an interesting process if you've never been a part of it. It's fascinating, actually, but we welcome that, definitely.
So our group has only been meeting since June of this year, and we're on a 12-month at least commitment. So why are we all of a sudden feeling like we're in a hurry to get polling done in March? I mean, it's very soon. I feel like we have plenty of time, and we still have to gather a lot more information. That's my opinion.
Go ahead.
I don't see it as pushing forward too fast. We as a city are almost at a precipice of going into more and more and more debt just to give us the standard services. And so what I understood our purpose to be was to talk about all of those various things. And since our very first meeting, the undercurrent has been, we don't have money. I don't know how serious that undercurrent is, but when I looked at the budget, when I looked at those numbers, and having been in accounting for a lot of years, this and this just don't agree. So from my point of view, finding out what's necessary to do the polling, what finding out is necessary to get something on the ballot, gives us the information that if, as a group, we felt that we needed to say to the city, we think we need to move forward with some kind of a tax measure within the next few months. That next few months is March, because you don't ever put anything you really want on a general election kind of thing. I don't think we're being hasty at all. I think we're just gathering information.
But we have different topics for the next 12 months, then, you know, why are we doing all that? If the purpose of this group was just to get behind the tax initiative, we should have just had that first meeting and then we could have been done with it.
It's
No.
not the same issue. It's
If
just
I
on
could,
their current.
there's topics through December. In December, we come back to the budget again. Because at that point then, the city will be moving into the development of the next 2-year budget. And we wanted this group to help participate in that, which might involve recommending a revenue measure. What is causing urgency is that, you know, unfortunately, there's a lot of variables when you look at these things. And if there's any possibility that a revenue measure would be needed to be put on the ballot in March, unfortunately, we have to start looking at it seriously now. It doesn't mean that the rest of this conversation isn't valuable. I mean, probably one of the most important conversations, they're all important, but we're going to talk about streets and infrastructures and all of that. Next month, the final conversation is about public safety, which is huge. I mean, so it's all still really important, and just the urgency about polling, though, if you can think of it as helping to better inform us in this group, because we don't know what a poll will come back.
And if I may add one other thing, I think you made some very good comments. You know, it's having that information in your back pocket. Ultimately, you could decide in December that after you've heard everything, you could say, council, we're not recommending moving forward with the tax measure because X, Y, and Z is our understanding after we've been through all these educational seminars. But after you go through this in November, you do feel that you want to make a recommendation, it's an added benefit, if you will, that yes, we've done this component, these are the results, X, Y, Z is the reason. And one last point, if I may add, is even if we do put something on the tax or the March, just circling back, we've continuously said it's not the only solution. It's not going to solve our issues one and done. It may be a drop in the bucket, right? So I just wanted to add that as well.
That's an important point.
That's another important point. The purpose of this group is not just that. It doesn't end the conversation. It may very well be that we put something on the March ballot, and still during the budget development process, you're engaged in making recommendations on services and priorities and things of that nature, because really that's the value.
Yeah, and I guess I see this as a holistic issue. You know, bottom line,
It is, yes.
looking at the budget, looking at how much the spending is important. Looking at the various funds and making sure that the general fund isn't funding any of the aquatic and you know, athletic fields, etc. And raising revenue in certain ways, particularly economic development and the right economic development. You know, like the hotels, like the right development with Trammell Crow. Those kinds of things all will be necessary, I think, to make this work. I mean, I don't think it is one thing and you're done. I guess how much does polling cost?
About $30,000?
I haven't seen the number. I think we're still working through.
Yeah, somewhere around.
It probably is worth it to
$35,000.
understand what that is. My gut feeling is without education, the community will say no to taxes. So you know, we may want to think about how you can do that quickly.
Well, I think one
Well,
of
that's
the
the nature.
difficulties with polling is how they poll people.
Right.
You know, the research in terms of, we've been talking about, well, how do you get information to people in Morgan Hill? Well, it looks like the trend is people, they're not even having internet connections at home anymore because they get all their news, everything from the phone. So if we write an article in a newspaper, if we put a sign up, chances are people are not going to see it. And so, you know, this group has the opportunity to figure out, well, what's the better way to inform people? You know, maybe Nextdoor is the better way, but on a phone, you always have the ability to just not look at it, not listen.
So can I piggyback onto that? I think we're talking about two things that can happen in a parallel fashion. The polling can go on because that's just more information. But last Saturday, at Saturday's meeting, we began the conversation and continued it via emails about how to inform the public. And we had a blog talked about, we had articles talked about,
Podcasts.
and all of those kinds of things. I think we should be tonight starting a timeline to set up how those things are going to happen. I agree with you. It's hard to reach the public. I don't agree with the Nextdoor thing because I stopped reading those because they just get the negative response.
Well, I think that any sort of internet.
Well, you know, the Facebook, the Twitter, Twitter apparently you can reach people in the wee small hours of the morning. And Instagram, but we need to, I think, start not just saying that these are some of the things we should do. We need to start talking about how we're going to do it and when we're going to do it. And if the polling is going on, I'm okay with that because once again, it's just more information for us.
Mm-hmm.
But we had started this conversation and I'd like to see it put some flesh on that skeleton that we started because it's the best way that I know of to reach out to the people. We need a chance to at least let people know what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Yeah, I question though whether or not we're going to get that much benefit when people have the ability, you know, everyone I talk to, their inboxes are just filled. And yet we have people who decided they didn't like the hotels and wham, they were able to get something on a ballot. I think it might be that the best way to engage people in Morgan Hill is to actually go up and talk to them. You know, I remember I read something from Parks and Recreation. They had a meeting and they said they had a table out there and they had all these people who came and talked to them and they answered questions and they said it was great. They did it that one time and then they didn't do it again. And I understood that if you're busy, if you're a commissioner, you don't want to do it. But there's a good opportunity to train some young people to sit at a table and answer questions. There are people around here who they don't know how to get information about Morgan Hill because they're so busy someplace else. But there's opportunities at the soccer fields, at the baseball fields, in front of the grocery stores. And so it's not high tech, it's not easy, but I think it might be a good
I
way
think
to
it's a
do
great
it.
idea, and I think we should put on this podcast because those people that commute are listening to podcasts.
And don't we have the Taste of Morgan Hill coming up? Everyone's in a happy mood
Yeah.
usually on that weekend. And they want to collect all these little flyers. I mean, that's a great
Maybe we
opportunity.
should have cups. Do you know Morgan Hill needs money?
I don't think there's any bad idea. I think they're all good and we should try everything we possibly can.
Yeah.
But getting back to the polling firm will tell us prior to doing the polling whether what the ramifications are of trying to do it in March or trying to do it in November. They'll come back and they'll say, hey, we think if you do it in March, this is the way the vote's kind of going to go within 5 or 10%. And if you do it, because the school district is doing the same thing right now. They're making that, I don't know, I've been in a meeting in a couple of weeks, but they're making a
Right, so
decision
our
based on
poor
polling.
community is going to be pulled out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think that's negative. You know, when you ask a person what they think, people are happy about it. They feel important. So,
They, I question the validity of trying to put two revenue measures on the same ballot because we're one school district and one city, but people, there are a lot of questions. For instance, you talked about the potholes and stuff. So what happened to this measure BA, whatever it was, that we're supposed to get all that money from the state to fill the potholes? That would be my first question about, well, what happened to that? Did we spend that already? You know, and so we need to be prepared for those kinds of answers and questions because people voted for those things and I think a great many people feel now that they haven't seen any return on that income. So to start asking for another.
If you're driving around Morgan Hill right now, trying to get anywhere, you'll see an awful lot of road work.
Yes.
Some of that is coming from measuring
Right.
money.
But nobody says that. I mean, it's just, the last time I hit a pothole, blah, 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 blah. So, but people, because that's why I have stopped listening to or paying attention to the next door, because you get that narrow vision from people with a really narrow negative attitude rather than trying to find out what's going on and how it's happening. They've already made up their minds. And for us to try to counteract that, I think some of the things that we've brought up tonight is really important. I mean, a podcast, we can reach a lot of people on the road.
I'll just add one thing to your point. That I'm a big fan of the podcast idea. I think one of the things with city council and politics or dealing with measures is there's a big gap between cause and effect. And people are so busy. Months later, years later, they've completely forgotten what had happened. If it happens like while they're playing a game on the phone or like the next week, it's a lot easier to feel visceral about it. And you mentioned the potholes as like a funny example, but maybe there's a way to tag our spend and remind people that this is paid for by Measure X, or this was paid for the last round of pothole fixing. Just reminding people that these are the things that actually were accomplished. And I don't maybe that's already happening. I haven't noticed it personally, but maybe there's ways we can like connect the thing that you approved and benefit to that.
The state puts up big signs.
Yeah, you probably
For
see.
by bond measure such and such and so and so. We could put up a farm.
Well, we don't hold money in everybody.
They're Sharpie.
Yeah, you put signs every place there used to be a pothole.
Yeah. Do you remember when I was here 2 weeks ago?
Do you remember when we couldn't drive on Monterey at all? So, yeah.
So who's going to do the podcast?
I did a little exploring. Kim's and her husband do some really wonderful podcasts. And we have some equipment here at the city that we could use. There's probably a bit more that we need to purchase. And so what I need, though, I know Matt said he was willing to be part of that. It is a process to create a podcast. And if you want people to listen, you want it to be worth listening to. And to be engaging. And kind of, there's got to be a little more personality than just blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
So it can't be a Maureen show or even an Edith show. It has to be, kind of a couple of people at least and maybe a guest. And so it would be great to have one or two people from this group who are willing to be a part of that, because honestly, I think it'd be more interesting to have some community members if they're comfortable with that. And you have to be comfortable, and there's rehearsing time involved, and then there's editing. I think Sergio, who's over here dutifully taking video of this, would be able to do our editing. But so it's not as simple as, great, let's just record this conversation and throw it out there and people will want to listen to it. So it's a good idea, but there is process that goes with it.
Can I, since there's a pause, so generally, Yay City polling is going to help us have information across the board. Is that okay? General nod of, yeah, okay, let's see where that goes. You talked about updating the city council on what you've learned and what and when, at what point you guys are going to talk to the city council on just touching base. You spend a lot of time talking about education. It sounds, or not a lot of time, but it sounds like education is a big part of this exercise, whether it's next door, whether it's blogging, whether it's articles or podcasts. There's an education component and a messaging component. So if this is sort of where you are feeling, what I'm thinking as I'm listening to this is the sense of, okay, we're still continuing the learning, but we have enough information where we feel we can start educating the community, and we want to not miss the opportunity of the March election. And I think that what I see as an opportunity for you to talk about is, do we know what is the message? If you guys were doing a podcast, because I spend quite a bit of time in my daytime job curating messages, and it takes a long time to kind of figure out what that message is. So I'm wondering, do you have a sense, if you were to be talking to the newspaper right now, or were to be interviewed for a podcast, what is the message?
Well, I think there are multiple messages.
It's kind of the meta conversation we're having here, like what do we think of the big topics?
Yeah, I mean, we've had 2 sessions, 3 sessions.
2 and 3 sessions, but 2 real topics.
So we've learned something new each go around, and we could start imparting that information, not stepping forward into talking about infrastructure just yet, because we could get more information. We could have, even go out and find some people who don't see things the way we're seeing things, and try to get that conversation going to make it an informed conversation rather than a he said, she said kind of thing. But we could just take each segment, each Saturday, and talk about that. Talk about the budget in layman's terms.
Well, I feel that, that it's good to be able to inform people on an ongoing basis of what
Right.
we're doing here. But I do think that there's lots of other things that we need to talk about too.
Yep.
Like
There's,
what?
well, for instance, when I did my reading, Edith had said, and other places say too, that retail is failing, right? It's
Yes.
closing, there's too much retail. Yet, almost every American likes going out, and they like buying things, and they like going to stores. And so they're saying that now retail is changing, that there's chore retail and there's choices retail. That's the newest trend, and it's really important to the millennials. Morgan Hill has the ability to be more in on the cherish type retail, where it's an experience. For instance, I have a girlfriend and her children come to Morgan Hill to sit under that tree outside Coffee Guys and play games. That's because for millennials, a location, being out, the environment is so important to them. And then I learned that Nike has a new store that they opened up in New York, in which you try on your shoes and you run track. It means that a store is more than just a place where you go and you look at shoes. If this is the trend, Morgan Hill has the ability to have that new store where there are experiences. I think that we're not going to be able to compete with San Jose. We're not going to be able to compete with Los Gatos. Morgan Hill has an identity. When people get upset about that Trammell Crow thing, when they get upset about the hotels, it's because they come to Morgan Hill and they have an image in their mind of what Morgan Hill is and what it stands for. And I think that the people who live in Morgan Hill don't always feel that the city government understands what they want. So I feel that it's very important as part of this group that we go out and we find out what's the image of Morgan Hill. They like the slow pace. Well, if we get a lot of traffic, that blows that up and people don't want that. That might mean that we have to limit what we do. Maybe big industrial spaces is not compatible with the way people see Morgan Hill.
What I was going to say is, when working with groups, instead of telling them things, it's always nice to ask. Like, we could easily have a booth at Taste of Morgan Hill, and this is with your podcast microphone. What's your favorite thing about Morgan Hill?
This will be recorded.
Right? Collect those things, and then somehow we have to mesh it with, well, we like this, but remember, we have to pay for these things too going forward. So, but people want to feel like they're part of the decision-making process, not talked down to. We have enough of that, blankety blank. What I'm talking about, we need, I'm talking about Donald Trump or just any authoritarian figure, people would rather be in a democracy where we feel like we're part of the
I
process.
think one of the carrots for that could be, hey, we're gonna have a meeting with city council in December. We have an opportunity to tell them what you guys are thinking.
I need to jump in. I agree with doing everything we can do to get the word out to the public. I think that's important, and I think it will get to about 25 to 35% of the people if we do everything we can possibly do. My thing, and I'm hearing that we may be in a hurry and that public safety is the last thing we're going to talk about. My feeling is we got to get a lens to look at this at that people will listen to. And cities were invented because people were not safe. So they came together, created cities for safety. There's not a law in the books that isn't somehow related to safety. There's not an employee of the city of Morgan Hill or of any city that somehow does not relate to safety. If you talk to any politician that's gotten elected to office, they will tell you their number one priority is public safety. And so my thinking is that's a lens we can put on this to talk about safety, to talk about we are a very safe city, we've got this great police department, we do things very productively, blah, blah, blah. But we keep crime statistics and, you know, when you go to your doctor's office, are you safe at home? You get asked. At some point in time, we may not be safe any longer. And that's the lens I think we got to put on this to really highlight the needs that we have to keep the city safe going forward. And yeah, we can talk about all the other things as well, but that's one message that I think everybody will listen to, and we maybe can get more people on board that way.
A couple years back, we tried to do something in that vein. Why did it fail? Does the city know? We tried to have people become aware of the fact that we needed more funding for first responders, police, fire, all that kind of stuff. And I happen to agree with you because I think from what I hear of the people around me, safety is the number one thing that they're concerned about. They figure they can take care of everything else, safety they can't. So when we tried this a couple years back, I don't know, 3 years, the last 2 or 3 years have been kind of a blend for me, so I don't know exactly when it happened. But why were we not successful when we tried that previously?
I can tell you one thing is commuting. You know, we've got, what, 75% of our population commutes?
Oh yeah, we're a bedroom town,
And
we've always known that.
So up until 3 years ago, I was commuting 50 miles each way to Hayward. And 3 hours on the road, I got home, I didn't read a paper, I didn't do any of that stuff. So I didn't hear anything.
I also think
And
that
that's common.
during that election, there were a lot of propositions that were asking for money. And I think that when people aren't sure why, they just vote no. So I think, just like Rick said, a lot of people, you know, I know a lot of people who say if they're not sure, they just vote no.
Yep.
Okay.
Definitely a no on any taxes mentality in the city of Morgan Hill. For sure.
Well, and I think that's California.
Yeah.
Because we're taxed, you know, at the state level a lot, at the property tax level a lot, so people feel they're taxed.
And then you hear about a surplus.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like,
Well, anyway, we have to circumvent that. Somehow or other, we need to get around that. Because at least in my neighborhood, and you know where I live, Steve used to run there. Okay, most of those people, nobody works locally, okay? They work from San Francisco to maybe Palo Alto, but none of them work down this way. To a family in my own cul-de-sac, safety is the number one thing. And when Gilroy happened, and we got the message in our neighborhood that there could be another person out there and they didn't know where that person was, and everybody lock your doors, lock your gates, get your alarm systems on, all that. We did it because nobody knew, you know. We were getting calls from Gilroy telling us to do this. And so when you've got a whole neighborhood that becomes consumed with safety, even on one single day, it sticks with you. And I do. I now lock my gates every day. I never used to do that. For 20 years, I didn't do it.
But when you're saying safety, do you mean police and fire or like terrorist safety or criminal safety?
No, police and fire. Our first responders in Morgan Hill.
No, not just police and fire. Filling the potholes, because that's a safety measure.
Well, it is.
Inspecting housing, because that's for safety. Everything we do is for safety. We want to grow our economic base, because that way we can provide more safety for our citizens.
Okay, and as Maureen said, the script has to be developed to incorporate all those things. And then the who, what, where, when, why, how to get it done. And you don't put it on a general election ballot. You want it over there by itself, where you only go to the people who are going to say yes, not any of them that are going to say no, because that's political science type stuff does. But, yeah.
And then the other thing is, how much are we gonna ask for? 'Cause that's, key point too.
Well, I think it's limited, isn't it? Like sales tax can only go
Yeah,
up certain.
sales
We've only got a quarter cent in Morgan Hill.
Yeah, that's all we got for that.
Well,
Maybe
and-
wet or
but
something.
then are there other kinds?
There are.
Right, there are.
Right. Like, who's the group that's doing a penny or something like that? I read it just recently.
Shasta County.
Shasta? Okay. Well, Shasta.
No, other than resend to the group, I sent you in follow-up information from the budget meeting. I sent you I sent you a lot of information, but there was the options, the options for different tax measures and kind of the pros and cons and whether they can be in a general, whether they're specific taxes, general taxes, whether they can be in a primary or the regular election, because not all taxes can go in March. So there was that sheet and then a little bit of a further explanation about the different types of measures. So I'll resend that to the whole group again because that is information. Some of it makes 0 sense for Morgan Hill. So there's not like a huge range of options because there's some that just won't make sense here. I'm concerned that there's 3 people here that haven't said anything, and Michelle, you're sitting here listening, but I want to make sure that, this is a full group discussion.
And I'm taking it all in right now.
She's getting ready for the podcast.
Hi, Kim! Can we just have you and your wonderful husband do the podcast?
And they can, anybody to do it.
It is a lot more fun to do that than to write a blog or write an article. And people are consuming it a lot more than anything else. So I think it has to be a dialogue or, more than one, more than 2 people. Mm-hmm. I think it would be phenomenal to have something where we have a few residents that are in the conversation. It should be a conversation. And we should see multiple sides to it all. Because, cost is always an issue in the absence of value. And so no matter what we think about doing in polling and any of that kind of thing, what's in it for me? Why do I want to spend this money if I'm not seeing the value that it's bringing? So I think that when we think of all of this, we have to be really careful and understanding what are we getting for this. In a time where it's already, we're already feeling upset because what we had, we don't have anymore in terms of we could write off our state taxes and now we can only do it to a certain limit. And people are feeling this crunch right now. So the value has got to be crystal clear. And I would also say this, because I'm in financial business, is like people only act on fear and greed when it comes to money. And so the fear of safety, that's huge in my mind. I think that Can't be sugarcoated.
Well, beyond safety, what are the,
One of the things I keep thinking about is we have a lot of what makes Morgan Hill special because of the development that's here, the parks, those kinds of things, development fees pay for those. And there's a point at which now the community is saying, we don't want more development. So I think educating them on that, if you don't want development, but you want the amenities that you love, that make this place special, then they have to be paid for. So I think how do we pay for those is one of the messages that we have to get across. If you like them, then you have to compensate. I think the fact that we're one of the few cities that has any kind of tax is an important thing to say to the community. Other communities are going to pay for.
You mean it has no additional taxes?
Yes, yeah, right, no additional taxes, city taxes.
Well, San Jose and Gilroy have a utility users tax.
Mhm.
You can never touch it.
Right. And
Yeah, well, I know, we did try.
And for the record, the utility user tax would also, a big contributor to that tax would be the companies, right? Because it's on their equipment. So it's not just on the residents, it's a really good option for spreading that, sorry. I am your biggest advocate for the record, if nobody has figured
So we
that out.
actually use
I am your
a lot of
biggest-
solar, so that our PG&E bill is actually very small.
But I really appreciated what Kim said regarding cost estimation of the value in the absence of value. Because when we're writing what is the message, well, how much and what type of measure, it's really what are we solving for? And that's why I asked earlier, do we even know what the message is? Do we have our arms around an agreed upon need? So at a very minimum, we know, if you believe what you've heard in the last 2-3 sessions, if we assume that that is what we know, so we know that we have $7 to $10 million of unfunded needs. $7 to $10 million of unfunded needs, right? And we can talk about that and make sure that we agree. But that is one of the things that we know. We know that economic development is part of the solution, but it cannot be all of the solution, right? And we know that we are already doing more with less because we've reduced the number of employees and we continue to provide quality services. So we know those things, right, on the measure, on the messages. So I appreciated where this conversation is going because that's what I think about is when we're ready to go tell the story, what is the story that we're ready and feel comfortable to share?
Another thing that I'll say, because you asked me to talk, is that it's very hard to marry the difference between people that have been here in Morgan Hill for a long time that pay very little in property taxes with all of these new people that are paying their fair share of property taxes. And so it's, how do you come to some sort of agreement? The people that have just moved here are going to say, we're paying a lot already.
Yeah, and they are.
In addition to that, and because we talked about people being cranky, 75% of the community already commutes, is already stuck in traffic 2 to 3 hours a day, right? They're already super taxed. They're not getting any tax breaks. And what's coming to us, whether we are ready or not, is new statewide legislation on housing that is further going to take away our resources that we have been used to with RDCS and make the community even more cranky because we are going to get a whole lot more housing whether we are ready or not, whether we want it or not. And a lot of that housing is very likely to be affordable housing that is also not going to be necessarily contributing as much to the overall coffers of the city. And how do we balance that conversation? Because that is going to happen It's already happening.
It happened.
It happened, it's going to be signed, it will be in effect in January, and we're expecting that tsunami. So here we are trying to have a very educated, well thought out conversation, and then there's this big housing conversation that is going to be upon us.
So it seems like everybody in the meeting agrees that public safety is, key, not only with us, with
Actually, I don't.
everybody else in the city. You don't agree with
No,
public safety?
and the reason I say that is because wherever I go now, I worry about someone just coming up somewhere and shooting me. I feel like I'm living a life where fear is just part of it, where I always have to consider, how do I get out of here, And so I think that when I talk to Millennium people, just watch their horror movies. Man, they can handle a lot of gore, a lot of violence. I just think that if we try and convince people that there is a problem with public safety because we want something, they won't like it. I think that it would be distrustful.
Really?
Yeah. We went through a recession here in the city, remember? We had to let go police officers.
Right.
We had no money.
Crime went up?
And then people, why didn't they vote for more taxes? It's like, I really don't think a lot of people in Morgan Hill are that impacted by crime. I hate to say that.
Let me ask for some clarity. I have been living here only for a short time, 3 years or so. I don't know, when you talk about polling, what is specifically how will you be polling the people here? And what is anything to do with March as opposed to April or anything? Because I don't know. The whole idea is if it is not tied to a national election or something like that, very few people really respond to polling, right? How do you conduct polling that's here in Morgan Hill?
So we hire a polling firm, we don't do it ourselves. So a reputable polling firm, actually there's the one that we're gonna use, we've used several times before. So that's what they do. What? No, Cladby and Associates. And so they craft questions for us that try and, capture all the different angles, the different types of wording, the different things you want to look for. One of the things they'll be trying to look for in this poll will be if there's a difference between November and March. And also, they'll be looking at a couple different options of different types of taxes that potentially could move forward and which is more favorable, neither are favorable. It's a whole science in and of itself, and that's why we always hire.
Will you be mailing those poll ballots?
So they'll be doing a combination of calling people and doing online to email addresses. Because of the fact that so many people don't have landlines anymore, and not all cell phones are available, it's getting harder and harder to do phone surveys, plus people just don't pick up. If it's a number you don't know, you just don't answer it, right? Yeah, so it's a combination of both, phone and online surveys. And they look at the voter registration files and get information from there so that they're contacting voters.
Now, what I am afraid is I get a whole bunch of polling by Democratic Party, Republican Party, and Southern Poverty Center and all that. When these things come, I don't even have time to look at anything. So I just tear it and put it in recycling.
Yeah, this will come in the mail.
How do you should be getting a sizable number of people resident in Morgan Hill to respond to this polling, right?
by hiring a company, they get enough, they don't stop until they get enough answers to make it statistically significant. So you can, so you know that you have a good answer from the community.
I mean, this might seem silly, but Facebook knows so much about us, and Google, why don't we ask them who they think? That's silly. Yeah, probably be a lot cheaper too.
I don't know, I don't know.
Actually, I think there is a service you can pay Facebook to get that information.
Yeah.
I think there is. Not everybody's on Facebook though either. Not, you can't.
A lot of people dislike.
Yeah, a lot of
Millennials
registered.
especially are on Facebook.
Yeah, there's a whole lot
Google.
of.
Let us hypothetically assume that only 25% or less people who are resident of Morgan Hill respond to this. Will it be a valid, whatever the majority, will you go ahead with this?
So, when you hire a polling firm, they do not speak to contact the majority of your residents. That's just not the way it works. What they're trying to do is get a statistically valid sampling of whatever population they are polling or surveying. And so it's a lot less than you would imagine. And like I said, there's a whole science and art behind it that is supposed to make it valid. And it's not going to be a majority of our residents. It's going to be way, 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 way less. I mean, it'll probably be, I'm guessing, somewhere not even 500 people.
It's probably just enough to say that there's a 95% chance that it passes.
No, it's not even that it
It's more than
passes.
50,
No, it's just, it's truly just to state that this is a statistically valid sampling. It has no, doesn't matter what way people are
But it always has a
responding.
margin of error.
Yes, right, exactly. There's a certain margin of error. And so, but it's not a lot of people. I mean, honestly, we've conducted our own surveys internally where we get way more people responding, not in a while, but we've had close to 2,000 people respond to surveys before that we've conducted. But I mean, our questions are not, you know, they're not based in research methodology. There's nothing about it that suggests anything is truly random about it. I mean, we know when we send out things, it's not random. It's the people who've signed up for our email lists. It's the people who are on Nextdoor. And that's one part of our population. It's certainly not all, and we miss a bunch of people. But a polling firm is, at this point, still best practice. And I don't know that it will continue to be, because it's getting harder and harder for polling firms to really pull together truly random samplings and have them be statistically valid, but it still is best practice. So it's the best way, in good faith, that we can get a sampling. It's a difficult thing to accomplish in this day and age.
So it's really important for us to try and come up with fees or some other sources of revenue for the city, I think, just in case this doesn't work, you know?
I think we should do it, even if it does work, we need more than one revenue source, so.
Yeah.
But
One of the things
Yvonne was talking about those people that annoy me to death with their clipboards and are you a registered voter and stand out in front of stores. There was a time when marketing companies, polling companies, would go into malls with people with clipboards and things. Is that still an option available with?
You can still have that type of surveying done. It's very expensive, as you might imagine, because you're paying people to do it.
Right.
And
$3 a signature.
That was for, they were collecting signatures for, but what do you call that when you sign a?
Petition.
Petition, yes, there. A little bit different than when you're, having people answer questions for polling. So I don't know what they pay the people to do that, but they're not, it's not based on signatures.
It's enough that they'll chase you.
Yeah, I think people who
I got chased by one and he said, but I can only get paid $3 a signature. I looked at him, I said, still another reason not to sunrise.
But I guess back to some of the earlier points, do we feel like Do we feel like there are common values or like shared goals? Like safety might be one. I keep hearing traffic is another one. Growth or control of growth being another one. That you could imagine a large percentage of the community would support. And I think when we talk about raising money, right, that's something that definitely probably needs to happen, even with the city's saying. Are most of the proposals we're talking about the mechanics of them going to be contributing to a general fund? Or are there opportunities for us to say strongly what value comes from this particular measure because we can literally allocate? You want extra first responders? This one is literally just for first responders. You really want potholes and intersections? This is really for that. For growth. Is the city considering that kind of stuff?
Yeah, you can do that. It requires a different level of voters voting yes to have a specific tax versus a general tax.
So if I may shed a little light, so March is going to be a special tax or special, you need a 2/3 vote to get anything passed anyway, so it'll be a special election. Moving forward, I think you're on the right track, so I think it's important as we have these conversations to really hone in on that. Yes, if we're able to tie the dollar to the benefit or the value, we need to identify what those are. The city, through our presentations for the past, we have identified some general unfunded needs, and they include everything really. Starting with public safety, police, fire. It includes infrastructure. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is it's really this group here, as well as the polling, will help us identify what's the priority that the community really wants. Do they want to fund public safety? Do they want to fund infrastructure? Do they want to fund building maintenance, CRCs, aquatics, and things of that nature? So I think there will be an element of the polling that will gauge that what is a priority. So that informs this group better to go to council, say, council, based on our discussions, we're able to say we want to either tie it to this, we want either, X dollars to this benefit, basically.
People are going to ask us, how did we get into this mess? So what would your answer be to that?
Well, there's, in a nutshell, there's various answers, but that may jump in on this, but I would say is recession being one. We've always deferred a lot of the maintenance.
That was a decision during the recession.
Decisions that we have made in the past to allocate dollars here versus here. And then any problem, if we don't address it, multiplies over years. So we have had that concern. We have had state legislations, much like this housing, is going to impact us. Redevelopment going away, so that was a big one. General local control is being taken away with more and more of these legislations. So that keeps our hands tied. We talk about capping the property tax at 2%. So there's just a wide area of things, and then obviously.
And I would say, if somebody says, how did you get into that? How did you get there? I would say, how did we get there?
Yeah.
Right? Because it's a community solution. Just let's remember that we as the city are doing better than most. That our financial struggle is no different than any other city out there. They're solving for the same issues. Cost of living is going up. And everybody's solving for the same thing. I think this city has been very, very smart and creative in the way that it has delivered services. And I think that, my humble opinion, I think that that is part of the message that should be conveyed, and with your, head up high. You should be very proud of that.
Yeah, I would say we are not in a mess. We just don't want to get ourselves in a mess.
Remember that as we look towards the future, we have financial issues if nothing changes. In this moment today, we are solid. But as we look towards the future, we see this issue. And so, we've been seeing it on the horizon, and we've made smart decisions, we've made good choices. There's a lot of things that people don't realize. I think if people would have had to feel a pinch sooner, like for instance, we are a standout throughout the country for how we provide recreation services with our partnership with the YMCA. We wouldn't have the recreation services we have here in this community if we wouldn't have created that very successful partnership, because our general fund minimally supports recreation in Morgan Hill. In many communities, recreation is fully supported by the general fund. Our general fund couldn't afford to do what we have here. If the general fund was supporting everything that we do in recreation, it wouldn't happen. When we contracted with CAL FIRE to be our fire department here in Morgan Hill to provide service, and there was some controversy around that. That wasn't necessarily as smooth. Everybody agreed that was the best decision. However, it saved us a huge amount of money in what we were paying to have fire services available. So, if some of those decisions and choices had not happened, we would already be seeing big issues in our community. And also, through all of that, an unwillingness of the community to support any new taxes for Morgan Hill.
And we have a long shopping list. We have a wish list. As a community, we have made decisions and master plans on parks, on safety, we have a shopping list of things we want to get. And that shopping list eventually gets into unfunded liabilities, because those are things that we know we want. We know we want to eventually get, but we don't have the financing worked out. We've been talking about a third fire station for a very long time. And what we're also seeing just globally is changes with climate change and what fire is now being pressed to do. The more and more police services are needed to address homelessness, not just a safety issue, but we continue to be stretched on the way we provide services.
And the other thing is we lost the RDA funds too, and that, I think, set us back a little bit.
Oh yeah, not just a little bit, a lot.
A whole lot.
Because those funds paid for a lot of things in the city that people aren't aware of.
But we have done things, I think, in the proper way and the sensible way. In 10 years of looking at capital plans, every single year, they would come to us on the Planning Commission, and this would be what it was set up to do. This is what they'd like to do, but this is what we would really, really like to do. And that involved roadways, water, sewer, all of the things. And the general population of the city of Morgan Hill has no clue about what that's all about.
Right.
Sorry, but they really don't.
That's true.
Okay, so now I'm ready to talk.
Okay, Michelle.
So I'm listening to everybody's point, which is that everybody makes such a valid point. And when you think about, so this is what I heard from everybody, we do need to go out and we have to take a vote, if you will, get a temperature, right, in the community. But how we ask for their opinion has to be from a place where it's meaningful to people. I think, Yvonne, you said something real important. You said safety may not be an issue. I think I heard you right. And you said safety is an issue. So we have a variety of different opinions, but they all boil down to one thing, which is quality of life. Quality of life in Morgan Hill. So when you think about how we want to construct the questions have to be constructed in such a way that it also educates the people that we're asking their opinion about. So to go out with and I mean no disrespect to any city folks here, right? But to go out with, well, this is what we did and this is what we accomplished, and the citizens don't know that this happened. I was like you, Rick. I was commuting for the majority of the year 2000 up until the recession, and I honestly did not care what your decisions were in the city, so long as my quality of life was intact. So if we think about it from that perspective, whether it's safety, Steve, to your point, or recreation, or what have you, how we ask for opinions to show the community that we respect their positions, or their opinions rather, has to be from their perspective of quality of life. Those questions can easily be asked. And they can be a little bit, written in, we could market them or write them in a way that's marketing knows how to do this, I don't know how to do it. But we write it in such a way where we're looking for where people might want to spend money or pay taxes rather, in what buckets. And we're not alarming people, right? We're not saying the sky is falling. We're saying we're in a good position, but we don't necessarily want to lose that. So let's take a poll to see if you were willing to pay another 0.25%, whatever it is, where would you want to see that go to continue the great quality of life that's in Morgan Hill? So I'm usually a person that likes to execute, right? I mean, we've had a lot of talk. You said it, Jennifer. Let's get off the pot here and let's decide what we need to do. We know the channel. We'll decide on the channel. It could be a podcast. It could be a mailer, right, with all of your pictures on the front so that all the neighbors will turn it over and read it. It could be anything, but the way we ask the question cannot be from the perspective of the people in this room. It has to be from the perspective of the people whose opinion we really value. So quality of life, I think, is how we need to structure these questions. And then we take care of your issue and what's important to you and what's important to you.
Yeah, I really think that when you mention what would impact your quality of life, just something open-ended, because,
Much better.
I'm an engineering manager, and so one of the things that happens is that if you have a team that has decided what the solution is from the very beginning, you can have big problems.
Yes.
Right? And so, what I worry about is the fact that we're pretty old here. Like, I'm a pretty old person. Here I am talking about community. But for our community to be vibrant, it needs younger people. And, the millennials, sometimes they're aliens to me. But they're the people who are going to grow the city and make it vital. I don't understand them enough. And so, what I think might be a problem, what might be a real impact on their quality of life, I don't know. They might have some different. And we might be able to leverage that difference for new sources of income for the city.
I just want to give a little bit of insight on, some people in the room may already know, but just a little bit more details about how the polling works. So I've been a part of a few campaigns throughout the state and how they do pollings. So what they'll generally do is they'll have a baseline question, and the baseline question would be, would you support a general tax in Morgan Hill? And they'll get the answer to that question, and then they'll test numerous different questions, follow-up questions to that. So they may ask things like, well, if they say no, they wouldn't support a general tax, they'll ask them, well, would it change your opinion if the money was to go just to public safety? And they'll get a reading for that. And then they'll say, well, would it change your opinion if that money was to be dedicated to roads or parks or aquatics? So then they'll use probably 8 or 10 different follow-up questions to see which one would actually change a voter's mind. The caveat to that is one of the best things that polls is when you say, well, if the money went to cleaning up meth labs, would you support it? Communities generally say yes. Well, we don't have a meth lab problem anymore in California. So my reason for saying that is just because something polls well doesn't mean that we would use it. So if you get the poll back and it says public safety tested very well, people are concerned about public safety, they're concerned about roads, they're not so concerned about parks, then the committee or whatever committee is going to actually go out and support the measure, they need to look at that and say, well, is that really something that we need in the city? So I think that we might be getting a little bit of ahead of ourselves trying to decide what that message needs to be tonight. So the polling actually gives you really good ideas about what do the citizens of Morgan Hill really care about, and does that change their opinion about what type of measure they would support. So I think we really get a lot of information out of that polling, and some of the opinions about whether or not they're accurate. They're pretty accurate when you look at even nationwide polling for different measures and statewide polling. They're generally pretty accurate. So I think once we get the answers to the poll, that will probably answer a lot of the questions about what's important to the citizens, but also what are they willing to vote for.
And I think there's a component of education in there, and we were talking about that earlier, which is you could say, would you want it to go to Public Works? And I would wager to bet that a lot of folks don't even know what that means. Right?
Yeah.
So it almost sounds like it has to be, there has to be an educational series, and I know that there are a lot of educational series going on right through the city. But in the absence of education, we're not really going to know what the community wants, and to add a sales, aspect to it, then we don't know what they're going to buy. Meaning to say, we don't really know how willing they would be to pay for additional taxes. Education is key, and it has to be education again from the perspective of the community. Can't say this is Public Works, definition Public Works, right? It's, how to describe Public Works.
And you know what, Michelle, that type of thing wouldn't be in a polling question.
No, but
They
it
would
has to be
be,
hand in hand, right? With simultaneously, as we continue to examine how we're going to make money, we have to educate the communities. We're going to do that individually, which is why we're here, but we're only going to touch at best 20, 25 people who actually want to stay on topic before they, want to move to this Netflix movie. But the reason I say this, and so last year I had an opportunity to meet a lot of people, and I knocked on doors, right? There was a lot of elections last year, and I knocked on a lot of doors. And I would say 8 out of the 10 doors I knocked on, people had no idea what was going on in the city other than they felt good about the city, right? There were parks, there was open space, the downtown was nice, or the downtown wasn't nice, it depends, right? The dam was gonna break, the dam wasn't gonna break, and all of it had to do with education. And the more you talk to people, and the more you show them something, maybe again, I'm serious, it's a picture of all of us neighbors on the front. People will stop and read it and look in the back, and we just have this series of very community-focused language and content around what's happening in the city from a quality of life perspective, and how do we want to keep that going. That's how we educate, I think, because a lot of people don't know what's going on. This room does.
There's I just heard this term today, and it's tredigital. And it was the whole, it was the whole idea of traditional, going through the traditional way, because if you go to get your mail anymore, very little that comes in the mail now, and I'm thankful about that. So now you think maybe we could do a big postcard or something, because people are paying attention now because they don't get very much in the mail anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole idea of tradigital is that you have, something that interacts with online, and we get just, the fire department came out with those big postcards about how to have your house in safety with I learned so much on that postcard about what's a dangerous situation for a fire. And I was really appreciative for that. So I think that we still have the capability to do something like that, where we just start the conversation traditionally in the mail, where we can get to everybody, and then the more people that moves online to the podcast and to all of that would be I think, a way to get more people more engaged.
How about, there's always those coffee with the mayor, coffee with the cop. How about coffees with some of these people where it's just kind of open-ended, sit down somewhere and you can take a sampling of the vibe from the people. We might not have to answer all their questions. We can maybe just listen, the listening campaign, right?
I like that a lot better than.
We're very open to doing things like that. I think every meeting I've said, and also in the communications that we send out to the community, is, if you have a group of neighbors and you'd like us to come sit down and talk with you, we're open to doing that. If having coffees in certain places and having a few of the city team there to just listen, and if there are questions, answer them, we're open to that. It would help, though, if this group pushed that instead of the city pushing it.
For those coffees.
Well, yeah, and it would help if this group would be the ones talking it up and, and starting those conversations. I mean, the intention of having an advisory group, one, is to, hopefully help provide some good foundational information. Two, to have you hopefully be somewhat of a pulse, but also to have you out there talking to people about the conversations that are happening when we all meet, because what you have to say about it is way more important than what I have to say about it, or what Edith has to say about it, or Chuck, or even, truthfully, even our elected officials. Because, friends trust friends, neighbors trust neighbors. Don't necessarily trust.
Depending on the yard.
And I think I go back and I'm concerned with the coffees and stuff like that. Are we getting to the people that really are going to be very impacted by this? And I think I'm thinking about all these probably millennials and newer people that have bought houses recently that are already paying a lot in taxes. And so, we think about having another tax, and we're going to ask them in March when they're stressed out because they're getting their
tax bill,
filing their taxes, and they're paying tax bills. I don't think that's effective at all.
Well, and if I can offer, I started with the meeting on, we started with the update on the polling, and that sort of took the meeting a little bit around that conversation. But if we backtrack to last time you met, you said, hey, we think we have enough. We need to talk about how to engage. We see value in us coming together to do an educational campaign. And that was before any conversations about polling. So I think that there's an opportunity for us to think about, outside of the polling, outside of March, is there an effort to have an education campaign or a conversation, a learning conversation with the community? And what does that look like, right? Because again, grounding ourselves with the task in front of us could be a tax measure or multiple, but there's more than that in front of us. This community needs help in working through conversations on, do they want development? Do they not? What does that look like? And I think that your help on what you're doing here is very valuable and could be so instrumental in helping us figure out how to maneuver those difficult conversations with the community.
Well, I remember when we were talking a long time ago about whether or not we should have more recreational facilities, and I think the city did some polls. I remember we had some grumpy people who didn't want the recreation center, they didn't want the aquatic center, they didn't want any of that. But most of the people wanted it, and we ended up with something that really enhanced the image of Morgan Hill that people enjoy. Mm-hmm. I really feel that people in Morgan Hill want certain things in Morgan Hill, but when I tell them I'm part of this group, they just tell me what they don't want. I've heard so much about Trammell Crow, my God, and the stuff I've heard about the Shoe Palace. My goodness.
People wanted those things, those big rec centers, but they were afraid of how
the cost.
Yeah, the money. Where was it going to come from? That was the thing. Yeah.
And then the city came to this group signing up to do listening tours. I really do, because I feel very strongly about the authority figure, meaning to say the city, coming in and asking the question.
Yeah.
I feel really strongly that I personally don't like it, and I'm on camera, so I'm saying it. But I love Lauren Hill. But I like the idea of this group to the extent that we can teach each other how to be comfortable doing that, going on listening tours, because I've learned so much. First of all, I've learned a lot here, and I'm glad that I've met everybody. It's a group of peers. It's not a group of staff, and it's not a group of politicians, right? Elected officials. It's a group of just normal people. So a listening tour means that I might call up 10 or 12 people that I know in Morgan Hill and say, meet me at Rosie's. I'm on a listening tour. I'm part of Morgan Hill Engage. It's something I committed to. I really don't know that I can answer your questions, but I just want to listen to what you have to say, because I want to be an extension of you, because I have a seat at the table. So tell me it could be something like that, right? Just as simple as that. So I really like that idea of us committing to do that, and then you do another 10 of your friends, and those friends tell 10 other people, and before you know it, we've sort of organically listened to what the community wants, and maybe that informs us on how we do the educational pieces, right? It helps prioritize what they are, but I, for one, again, we have to do something. It's nice to be here and meet with all of you, but we do have to do something, and maybe it does start with listening tours. Each of us commits to do.
And that's why we have these, I love the speaker series, and I came to the one last week, but that's more like I was saying earlier, top down.
Talking
right.
to you.
But if we also intermix it with these listening series or listening campaigns, then people will see, they can come learn from authority figures, but they can also just sit with their neighbors, and between all of that, maybe we could come up with a pulse on what's happening, or where people's values and how they're going to make decisions.
I think that's what we've kind of done here. And because some of us knew one another coming into this, but the whole thing was to make information available to everybody about what the city was about, which has helped me. And the talking to people thing works. We did it with the downtown thing. We started in 2006, we did it again in 2008, we finally did it in 2009, and then they used the buildings downtown to put up what it could possibly look like. That brought a lot of people.
Yeah, that did.
Who would not necessarily have ever walked into downtown Morgan Hill. Kids with, mothers with strollers, baby carriages, the whole 9 yards, and kids, I like that, I like that, I like that. That's how everybody found out what needed to be. And the city took all of that information and was able to translate it into what were the most important things that we were going to do downtown. And we still have 2 empty buildings down there.
We're working on it.
Because from those retail elements.
Just let me do
I was just gonna ask for a time check.
Yeah, a time check. We're at 8:10, and this is supposed to go to 8:30. And so I guess that I would encourage the group, I'm really trying not to say too much and trying not to be directive, but I would encourage the group to maybe kind of make some agreements, or what is this, and this is only a subset of the larger group. What are you willing to commit to and take on? I mean, there's a lot of great ideas here that are floating around. But it requires, effort and time spent by all of you. We are happy to offer as much facilitation as possible of things, but we cannot do it all as the city, nor do I think it would be effective. That's not what this is about. So, if there's a group of you that think listening tours are a good idea and would like to do that, then perhaps someone can take that on and we can start coordinating how that would happen. And, if there's extra resources people need to feel comfortable doing that, we can talk through that.
And do you need protocols, right? Like, you know, do you need anything to go forward and run with any of that stuff? Or is there an understanding of, okay, we're gonna go explore how to do this, come back to the group?
Is there anything that precludes us having other members' names and phone numbers?
You have,
We already
we have
have
them.
We have them.
I've provided that out to you. and you are
I
more
know
than
I
welcome.
have it there, but we can use that, right?
Absolutely.
Sure. We all
There was
This
volunteer.
isn't like a committee where you can only talk to two people out of
No.
five.
Oh, no, this is not a
Okay.
council
Not
appointed
Brown
Act.
committee.
There's no
This is
Brown
not a
Act.
Brown Act. This is just a group of community members getting together and talking. We are under no restrictions like the Brown Act.
Very good.
And I did send, I can send again, the
I
sheet
probably got it there
with
somewhere.
emails and phone numbers. I've been, exposing all your
Right,
emails and
I
my
saw it
emails
up there,
to you
but I
now.
wanted to be sure.
Yeah, I started off
Too
not
long,
doing that,
I
I was
was
telling you
starting-
we're sure we have a group.
So, I guess, I certainly would volunteer to come and look at the polling questions. I'd be interested in that if I have time, depends when it is. I certainly would be willing to commit to going and creating my own listening groups. We have 400 employees, only 33 are Morgan Hill residents, but I certainly can talk to those 33 people. And my wife works at the school district, so she has another set of friends there. And again, we've been in the community for 20 years. So we've got friends all over the place. So absolutely would love to do, just my own listening kind of tours. The one thing that I might request or either put together myself or have somebody do it is a few talking points.
Yes.
That's what I meant when I was saying like protocols. Is there like a message that you've agreed to?
Well,
Like,
I'm
what is-
a finance guy, so I think about the budget.
Definition of
And I think,
this.
okay, what's our budget problem?
Yeah.
And bam, 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 5 years from now, here's what the budget problem is.
Understood.
So along with that, and I think that
An access
somewhere around,
statement.
yeah, we all,
So Jennifer just pointed out that, and I can.
In your first handouts.
There's some basic
Advice
information.
paper, And
Yeah.
it's 2 pages, and I think if you work from this so that we're all on the same page, it would be ideal rather than, we know we're going out and we know we're listening and we're not judging on anybody's opinions or anything, but to get the conversation started, I think we should all be playing with the same playbook.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea if we, all agreed to ask maybe the same 3 questions, and we could use email to decide, because the questions are really important. We don't want to divert people in a certain way and then miss something that,
Well,
everyone's.
it's gonna launch itself into different areas. You can't help but have that happen, but we can still bring back.
Well, we could ask the same 3 questions and additional questions, because when you're talking to someone, your conversation's going to be organic. But if each of us had the same 3
No, I
questions
agree
that we
that
all
we need-
decide, it might.
I think it would be smart if whoever's interested in doing these, maybe we form our own little group and we do sit down at Rosie's one night and just have a practice session and talk about what we want. And then when we do if we do individual campaigns, maybe we go in a team of 2 just so we have each other to bounce off of or back each other up or support each other. That's how I would try to build
You're
it.
saying you don't like this room for a photo meeting?
No, it's fine, but I mean,
You just need a glass of wine with it.
Then the conversations will really take off.
Kim, I want to go back to the millennial, because I think you make a really valid point on the younger workforce commuting and having bought the more expensive homes and paying the higher property taxes and whatnot. And they are being very closely affected by the higher gas tax because they're commuting. Do we have a sense of where these people are living? Are they living in developments that have HOAs?
I don't know. I mean, that's
Almost.
probably.
Yeah,
no doubt.
Actually, they are.
And I would say that you also have to consider where they're coming from, because, and I don't know if we're getting any residents from there, but like I hear from people that live in San Francisco, how much they dread it there now, and they're all moving out of San Francisco because every day their car is broken into and the police never show up. And so where are they coming from? Has that been a threat, and is that why they're here? Because if it is, then great, we can talk to them about safety and police and the need for all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm curious about.
Well, we could get to that avenue by starting with quality of life. You know, just simply, how do you view that quality of life? But I'm trying to think about the quickest and brightest way to get to that group of people that we want to bring into the community. We want them to become more involved. And so to go to those
can we do it through the schools? Is there some way? Because I just think that that's a natural place
No, not
for all.
Schools are going to do
I
that.
know. But it's the only place that I know that they're there, right?
Well,
I recommend
you
you
think
check
of
out
the.
well, they will go for
Station
school
around
things,
here.
that's
True,
right.
that too.
Well, we could go to, you know, we all belong to different organizations, service organizations or whatever. We could get up and give a 2-minute speech at those. We could also go to pony baseball, soccer, all those other things where the parents are there, you know, with their
The
children.
gym.
But
Yeah, they
they're,
are at the gym.
They are at the gym.
Every place.
Yeah,
So,
they're at the bars and the
let's talk
restaurants.
about that. Millennials go to the gym, so maybe we should try to put some listening tour groups in that lounge area right there at the gym. Because we've captured them, we could lock the doors if we must, but.
I think that's a really good venue.
It's a good idea.
It's a good venue. I've been there.
At the CRC, is that what you're talking about?
CRC, yeah, for
24
the
hour
AA.
Or 24 hour, I mean, all of
All
the
the
gyms.
gyms.
And just go and, I mean, obviously they care about their bodies, so let's see if they care about the city that they live in, which I'm sure they must, and, or if they don't yet, they will.
We need to educate them if they don't.
So that we can try to grab some of these aliens.
Well, and on Saturdays and Sundays,
Yes.
Yes.
because they're in town.
Well, a lot
Or
of
at 11
them
o'clock
go
at
work
night.
out before they even go home, you know, because we all know that once you get home, you have to return.
Well, a lot of parents, after their children leave school, have them go to the CRC because the Y actually keeps track of them. They're inside and the RY is the most popular Y in Santa Clara Valley because of the attention they pay. So we hit a lot of parents who probably don't even go to the CRC. But I think the podcast is a really good idea, and I was reminded how the CDC wanted people to prepare for emergencies, so they came up with this idea. It sort of backfired of the zombie apocalypse. It kind of backfired because there were people who really thought there was a zombie apocalypse. But I think a story and a city podcast would give us, we would be in the news. You know, you'd have a lot of people interested, there'd be excitement, it'd be fun, millennials are all into fun. And if part of while we're doing our zombie tale, we have to talk about, hey, you can't have that fence because we just don't have the money in the general fund because, you know, it's gotta go to safety or something like that. It would be imaginative and people would check it out. And maybe if they can contribute to storylines, they'll learn and be engaged. You know, we make it kind of fun.
I'm curious about, one of your questions about the people that moved to Morgan Hill is like, I think there's people that specifically chose Morgan Hill because of certain aspects, and some just lucked out, you know, with like, oh, I landed here, hey, it's pretty good. So, I mean, there are two different, you know, things that draw people, that, how do they land here? So, I mean, that's just another thing to think about.
So I'm one of these folks. My wife actually is from Morgan Hill. She grew up here since the 80s, but we moved from San Francisco a few years ago. We came down here. So if you want to talk to me afterwards, I can share all the secrets. But I would add to the list of things that we've all discussed already. Podcasts, I would personally totally listen to them. Not that I'm a representative sample.
I think you are. I think podcasts are, I mean, we get in trouble with our kids because we don't listen to them enough.
And you can totally make them about something really, really specific and then broaden the story. It's like potholes. Okay, but the broader story is our state of our roads. Right? And like that's what you throw in at the end.
Yeah. Just what is a pothole?
Right, like the signs and the noises, right? The other thing I was going to say is like commuting is a big, big thing. So for people like me who may be commuting all the way up the peninsula, every single day, 2 to 3 hours, easy. You can catch a lot of them at Caltrain station every morning, where they're sitting around waiting for the train to come, or waiting for their bus, or just carpooling or whatever. So I think that could be another really good spot, a public place where you could find them in a row, you know, waiting and just having nothing to do. So
Yeah, we were thinking about recruiting train stations.
It's not a bad idea.
I think downtown is always a really good place to just find, you know, put out a table, find a way that people can still have a drink and maybe listen to you, put up with you talking to them, I don't know. So I always find that people like to be able to eat and just socialize because people work so hard. So getting people to meetings is really, really hard. So to the extent I think that you can find those places where they're already at, that would be helpful. And I'm also thinking that from who do you want to reach out to? Yes, millennials, absolutely. We always struggle, the young generation. But also the seniors, you know, they vote. They are the ones that are voting. And we have a really strong and growing senior population, and we know where they're at. We know how to find them.
We also have diverse groups that may not necessarily.
Sounds like we're going to spend a lot of time at CRC. Get the young and the old at the same time.
Okay, we're at 8:25 almost.
Go on.
We
You
do have
took
special
pictures of everything you wrote up there, Edith, right?
I'll take pictures.
Somebody
Yeah, I'm
did.
gonna take
I saw
pictures.
somebody taking pictures.
Yeah, and I've been taking notes, so I'm gonna try and figure out how to wrap this
Okay,
all
are we
into
gonna
a.
have any action steps this time, or are we just still in the
I know I'm gonna do a
percolation
listening
stage?
tour, basically.
Yeah, I can get you a list.
Okay, because one of the things that I would like to see done is Michelle's idea with the flyer and all of
Yeah, I
our
can do a mock-up.
pictures. Who, you know, just no staff, no elected
Yeah.
officials, just the great unwashed on the front of the flyer, at the back of what we're trying to do, what we're hoping to do, and how we need the community's help to do this. And then follow it up with giving them places to go, websites, and podcasts, and whatnot on that. Is that, I mean, that's what you're saying, is that you put that on the flyer
The
for them to go.
Yeah, and I mean, and I just say, don't sugarcoat it. People don't know, finances are hazy, they don't understand any of this stuff. And so, in everything that is coming across in the media, it's that we want it, and it all should be free. And, you know, nothing is, we cannot have our cake and eat it too. I mean, I say that all day long to people because everybody wants the perfect scenario and they can't have it. And so you cannot be afraid of telling people that. Right? And just look, you know, you want an additional policeman, you have to pay for that. It doesn't come for free, and the money comes from us. And, you know, you've got to be extremely clear.
Yeah, and I think part of the clarity is to state, we are not in a mess now. But show a couple of those graphs that says what we're trying to head off are these lines going this way. We want to put a dam in front of that so it doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I think that equating like the money to another police officer, there was some one graphic, that slide, I love that slide because, I mean, I love graphs, I could look at them all day long, but I don't think everybody can. But the whole way we were able to show that, you know, what the numbers mean in terms of an actual policeman and other things. Can't remember what the slide was, but it was very powerful. I
An
thought.
hotel.
It was a visual. That one.
It was a hotel, a
That
dealership, and a Costco, what those would represent in terms of revenue and what that looked like in terms of police officers.
Yeah, because how powerful is that? I mean, people don't want a hotel, but it'll pay for whatever it pays for.
You know, I like the idea of listening stations and the terminology of a listening station, I think it would be nice to have some sort of logo or something that when you wear it, it says, hey, I'm here to just ask your opinion about what you like or something, because I can see us wanting to do this throughout the rest of the month that we're part of this group.
I will, I said it at the economic development presentation, and I said it last time when I presented, and I'll say it again because I think it's important. The lowest hanging fruit, unless you don't agree with it, and you don't have to agree with it, but the lowest hanging fruit on a silver platter, it's right here. $800,000 annually to the city. There were 2 hotels, they have already been vetted, they've already been designed, they've already been approved, they've already been entitled. They're gonna be on the March election. And my question is, who's gonna go fight for those hotels?
Well, I mean, the thing is that it's what the people want. If the people don't want the hotel, they don't want the hotel.
Yeah, but then they have to
We need to look for,
why
we need
they
to
don't
look
want
for
them.
other sources of revenue. Because we think we understand that they could be convinced in a certain way. I'm not so sure of that. Because when I talk to people about this, they still don't want it, you know? And so there is something that they want in Morgan Hill. I wish I could crystallize what they're talking about. But they have a vision that Morgan Hill is fulfilling now. And somehow those hotels aren't fitting into it. I don't know, maybe they're not being marketed right.
Well, you know,
I don't know.
It's funny because from a business community point of view, we want the hotels.
Yeah.
We want an
Absolutely, yeah.
upgraded set of
Right.
hotels that, you know, our visitors can go stay in, and we can be proud of Morgan Hill being represented by nice
And
hotels.
quality of life is a pitch that I make from a quality of life perspective. We want to keep Morgan Hill a small community, then we have to grow our visitors, right? From economic sustainability, then our strategy has to be growing our visitors as part of that fix. I'm just suggesting that as you think about your campaign, there is an opportunity to educate our community about the value of those hotels. And when they say they don't want the hotels, I'm interested in learning, why is it that they don't want it? Is it because of the horrible things that the lies that they heard when they were signing the petition?
No, one of the things that keeps coming back is that they want a grocery store or something over on that side of town, and they felt that a hotel was going to throw that out. Now, I can tell them that it's not true, but that's not changing their mind. So I don't know.
We would love a grocery store on that side of town,
See?
but it doesn't support it.
We have,
Right? We know retail.
we have a retail
But if you
conversation
have
coming up.
17%, you know, if the usage of the grocery stores here is at a higher rate than other people, and we have a very diverse population that goes throughout the Santa Clara Valley for ethnic foods and stuff like that, maybe there is a spot for a certain type of grocery store here that we don't have. And that's why, you know, one of the things we should do is we need to think about ways of revenue, other revenue sources.
Oh, absolutely. And part of that's economic development.
Right.
And again, the right kind of economic development.
So September 25th, I think, is our next economic development conversation on retail specifically. So for folks that are like, well, I'm not so sure that hotels is what I want. And maybe it's fair that they don't want it, right? Some people are just not, you know, it's fine. But if they want to come and learn about grocery stores and retail opportunities, invite them, show up, join me. It's at the Granada Theater. We have little bites of food, and you can buy your own drink. Not buying drinks from people, but you can bring your drinks and get as many as you need.
Speaking of drinks, there is a request that we might be a little bit more productive with wine.
So the city cannot supply you with wine at these meetings.
We can bring our own booze.
You can always bring
Can they
your
have a
own.
meeting outside of City Hall?
They can do whatever they want.
And we will.
Yeah, we're gonna get a roses, right?
I'm on my way.
I mean, the city is buying these little treats, but we can't buy alcohol for these meetings. You know, if you would like to meet someplace else by yourselves or invite others, and purchase your own alcohol, that's absolutely fine.
You can come to my house. Yvonne, when you spoke about the ethnic grocery stores, in the second downtown plan, one of the concepts was to have one or perhaps two small, just small grocery stores. Not 7-Eleven type of things where it's just going to be alcohol and that sort of stuff. But the ethnic grocery store was one of the suggestions that the planning commission had on the table when we talked about those things. So, you know, that wasn't outside the realm of possibility.
Yeah, and I think that the hotel downtown, when they have that little market section, could
Well,
have
I
something
think
that's
it's
more
gonna-
like
I think it's gonna be some of
We
it.
have several ethnic grocery stores in town right now.
I'm gonna call time. It is 8:30. I have some cleanup work to do here, so if there's people who want to stick around and have side conversations for the next 15 or 20 minutes, that's absolutely fine with me. The takeaways that I'm getting in terms of things that people are willing to do, sounds like we've got a few people who are interested in the listening tours and maybe helping to organize that. Nancy Domnauer, Rick, Michelle. Kim, were you one of the people who wanted to be involved in that? Or you're kind of involved in a couple of other things right now?
Yeah, no, I don't mind showing up and listening, but coordinating it, I'll be doing.
Michelle, I heard you talk about possibly being involved in a mock-up of a flyer.
Yeah, I could do it.
Just so you know, as long as we're in education mode, the city can, you know, has dollars put aside for some educational pieces in relation to this. If it turns into a campaign for a measure, the city can no longer be involved in financially doing that, or, you know, in action either. But right now, in an educational mode, we certainly have dollars to even pay for a designer to do that. But input from you first would be awesome. And then Matt we've already had some connection about podcasts, and so I need to connect with you in more detail. I don't know if Kim would be interested in being in the podcast.
I don't mind being on it, I just not coordinating it.
Yeah, no, that's fine, I get it. So, podcasts, flyers, and listening tours, that's kind of the three big things I'm hearing you're willing to do. Yep.
I'd like to join whoever was going to do polling. I'd love to learn more about
Oh,
polling.
yes, sorry, and a few people who were interested in being part of that. I should just be really clear, and I think Scott did a good job of kind of explaining in more details. We don't just have free reign to do polling any way we want to. The reason we hire a polling firm is because they're the experts. We provide our input, but they're the ones who are driving the show, truthfully. But would love, so I know, Rick, you said you would be interested. Matt, if you're interested, we'll let you know when those meetings are going to be. Unfortunately, we will not be able to work around your schedules.
Yeah.
But if it works in your schedules and you can join us, that would be awesome, because we already talked about having some representatives from this group being part of reviewing questions. What happens is they'll provide us with the first draft, and we'll go from there.
Good.
Okay? Thank you so much for being here this evening. It's above and beyond, and this room is rather warm. I apologize. If you'd like to take some snacks that you on your way out, please do.
I don't know, I've never done one before. Have you done it?
My husband does it. So we have a podcast together for our business. And it's pretty easy. I mean, like, we'll provide
You've already done it.